how can you just not love this team? I mean, they fight so hard that they break your heart. But, it's so frustrating.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ooh, it just stings. It just stings, man. Welcome to this episode of Locked On UCLA. Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer with you guys. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. It's your team every day. UCLA loses to the Fighting Illini in Champaign, Illinois, 83-78. This is a game where you could have thought UCLA's dead. They're out of it. At least 3 separate times, they're getting cooked. And all of a sudden, UCLA fights their way back in it to the bitter end where they're one missed rebound away from potentially getting a chance to have possession down 3. I know Illinois could have fouled. Whatever. They fight their way back. This is a game Illinois led by as many as 16 with just a few minutes left. It was 76-60. 76-60, and UCLA put up 18 points, and Illinois had to make some free throws. And UCLA fought their way back. Now, for a large portion of the game, you had Yakachonis making absurd shots. UCLA was down 2 or 3, and he threw up some absurd shot to put them up 5, which I think in my mind truly ended the game despite a Sky Clark 3. But UCLA, they're going to have to play much better in what was a pretty bad mismatch. Illinois shoots threes. They shot really well. They did turn it over in the second half a little bit, but they shell-shocked the Bruins, mostly kept the Bruins in check because they just dominate the glass. Illinois is +6 in second chance points. UCLA lost this game by 5. Illinois makes 18 of 20 free throws. UCLA misses 5. All right. And now the game comes down to a lot more than just those 2 stats. But if you're going to win a game more than a time zone away to Illinois, the Central, wherever you're going to go, more than a time zone away, the devil is in the details. You have to be perfect to beat these teams. Like Illinois, despite 8 losses, healthy, they are tough to beat. That crowd was rough on the Bruins, rough on Sky Clark. To win these games, you're not going to get cupcakes going up and down the West Coast. UCLA got those already, cupcakes, if you will, beating Oregon, beating Washington, beating USC. Those weren't cupcake victories, but those are cupcakes compared to UCLA traveling more than just a mile away. All right. Now, UCLA did their best. They got red hot from 3 at the end of the game. They had 12 threes in this game, 9 in the second half. UCLA putting up 53 after a half where they scored 25. They got red hot. You're like 16. Maybe you're listening to Josh Lewin. You're like, this game's, like the old Chick Hearn in the refrigerator. Maybe you're like watching this game like you turned it off on Peacock. You're like, I can't bear to watch this game end the way it is. But Mick Cronin's teams, in these weird situations, they almost did what they did to Arizona in a greater comeback fashion, right? Down big, have nothing going against them, and all of a sudden they're down 2. That's kind of what happened to Arizona. A little different because Arizona was an 8-minute stretch for the most part where they didn't make a shot, and then UCLA came back, clawed their way in a very ugly, low-scoring game. UCLA shot well. They shot well from 3. They didn't turn it over as much, although they did nearly triple their turnovers from last game, and they had more turnovers in this game, UCLA did, than their last 2 games combined. And they only had 8 turnovers. But Illinois had 9 points off those 8 turnovers. So they made the Bruins pay more than a point per turnover. UCLA did force some Illini turnovers. They did burn them, but not enough to the point where UCLA can account for the excessive rebounding advantage Illinois had. You saw that on the most crucial last-second play of the game where UCLA gets a rebound. They're pretty much in it. UCLA can't make free throws. 10 of 15, not great. 67%. Illinois, 18 for 20. A Bruin killer, Kylan Boswell, former Arizona Wildcat. If you're a hater of the Arizona Wildcat, you're probably not a big fan of Boswell making free throws. And you're like, he's 1 of 4. But Illinois at the end, when they broke UCLA's press break twice so beautifully, man, like a lot of teams struggle in those late game scenarios where the Bruins are fighting, scrapping and clawing, they can get a steal, maybe get within 2 or 1. Illinois broke it pretty good at the end of the game there. And man, like most teams just lose that game by 25. Like just most teams lose that game by 25. And I know in the last episode, I went on a rant about how UCLA is a top 25 team. And you're like, man, that doesn't change my perspective. Now, if they lost this game by 25, like it looked like they might 3 times, I'd be like, okay, they're still a tournament team. They have work to do. But the way they fight, the heart, how do you just not, as a UCLA fan, not want to embrace this team in an era of NIL, in an era of transfer portal, that Cronin has gotten to his team in the best way? Now, it didn't necessarily turn into defensive stops. It didn't turn into a 70-68 win. It turns into UCLA having heart late in the game on the road where they are being rudely treated by some new Big Ten rivals, and UCLA hasn't won a game farther than East Coast. That's the only reason I could think of that UCLA is not ranked, because the voters, the pollers were like, they deserve it, but we know as soon as we put them in, they're just going to go right back out. That is the only explanation as to why UCLA was not in the top 25 this week. 7 straight wins, and Illinois is a good team. Like SC went and beat them by 10. Illinois has a lot of losses, but they have a lot of good wins, and they are very dangerous despite what was a lot of lost veteran leadership from last year. Now, Yakin Shonis just threw up a lot of shots. 8 of 14. The Bruins couldn't stop him. 24 points. Made a bunch of clutch buckets late. Did almost everything, including turn the ball over. Dissects, 16 points, was lethal from 3. And Illinois just made a lot of buckets, grabbed their misses, and was able to put them back a couple more times where UCLA, they got a defensive rebound here and there, got a call here and there. Maybe they could have stole this one, as they nearly did at the end. But you'd have been very lucky at the end to pull this off. Illinois led this game for nearly 38 minutes. It was tied once. UCLA never led. Let's not forget that. Despite the heart, despite UCLA proving they could almost score, that's not the game you want to play. You're not going to go win at Illinois. Score 80 points and outscore them when they score 80 points and they're not playing terrible basketball. That is not how UCLA was going to win this game. Now, they have the heart, they have the tenacity, the heart of a champion, the tenacity of a top 25 team to make that game, when it could have been ugly, really close at the end where the Bruins nearly stole it. But we can't forget that Illinois dominated, and they used their advantages to very big strengths, and they flexed their muscle. This was a moment where Adai Mata had his worst game as a Bruin, and we'll touch on that next. Worst game as a Bruin since he's been a very important piece to UCLA's success. That's a key note there. Don't misquote me that it was his worst game as a Bruin. Could very well be. He's had some very bad games. Worst game when he got exposed physically, wasn't strong enough down low to make a difference. Although he was in the game, and when he came in, UCLA had a big run, but he couldn't be in there for a sustained period. I liked what William Kyle did in this game. I wish he saw a couple more. And also think Mick Cronin got technical, led to 2 more free throws. All right. The Bruins as a whole have to keep their cool. And we saw what UCLA had when they don't necessarily have a Adai Mata as a weapon. And this game was not a Adai's game to dominate. And we saw what could happen. More on that next on Locked On UCLA. All right, we're past the holiday hustle, maybe heading into some more holiday hustling. And there's nothing that, like giving your home a little TLC. You're going to be stuck inside all weekend. It's raining in Southern California. It's going to be raining all across the country. And maybe some time to declutter and refresh your space and get you back into a routine when the sun comes back out. You can tidy, you can clear out. Just want to give your space a new look to start the year, start the rest of the soon-to-be spring season with Wayfair that has everything within your need and within your budget. All right? They've got free and hassle-free delivery, even for the larger items, and you can find furniture and huge selections that makes the pieces you want that fit your style and your budget. There's something for every style, every home, and it's easy to tackle those New Year's home goals. You put them off to the middle of February. Well, there's a better time to do your early spring cleaning when you're stuck inside waiting for the wet weather to pass. Give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. All right, we're cruising on segment 2. We're talking the UCLA loss to Illinois. Snaps the 7-game win streak. UCLA lost 83-78. And I think some crucial facts that might be held against UCLA. They've not won a game outside of the Mountain Time Zone, right? And that was before the time changed. No, that was after time changed. I lied. That was in Mountain Time Zone, right? There's only one in Phoenix. They have not won when they've had to travel east as far as Nebraska, as far as Illinois, let alone to New York, where arguably their ugliest loss of the year was to blow a 16-point lead in North Carolina. They have not lost. They have not won any of those games. And we're seeing how difficult it is for those teams to come west and then find that it's just as tough to go play USC and UCLA. Oregon's really slumping, but they had a lot of wins early. Even Washington has stunned a team or two. And the Bruins have struggled to go east. Now, let's remember, they just came off a potential norovirus. Did that affect their defensive intensity for the beginning? They traveled. They had all those days off, and they spent it just puking in the bathroom. Whatever you want to visualize the worst days off experience. You got a vacation. You're like, okay, I still got some things to do. No, you're just stuck in the bathroom, and you're sick, and they're dropping like flies. And then they went out and they dominated Penn State. Oh, by the way, they're still recovering, and they got to go travel to Illinois from a Saturday matinee to a Sunday to a Monday. Now it's a Tuesday, all right? And they got to be out in the Midwest. They got to go from Illinois to Bloomington, Indiana, and stay out there and find ways to win. Indiana wants to ruin UCLA's potential season. Indiana wants another signature win. If they have a small chance to make the NCAA tournament, doesn't look like it, but maybe they can, despite UCLA's late game onslaught where they made 10 of 11 against Illinois. So I forget. They have not won. They were playing sick, and they haven't figured out how to, when teams are really good at rebounding, the Bruins, despite the Adai Mata addition, sometimes have to balance between Mata or can they get some significant William Kyle minutes. And he was good there late. He made a dunk, committed a personal foul when the Bruins had the press broken. I wish maybe UCLA could have gone to him more. Now, a common thread between UCLA losses, I pointed to this a month ago, you'll see when teams, it's not just Adai Mata if he doesn't exist, it's when Eric Dailey Jr. does not have a lot of success. He had a couple of turnovers, a couple of personal fouls, was 2 of 6 at 5 points in 20 minutes. I want to point to Bilodeau. He was really good. He shot better than 50%, I think had a career high from 3, was ripping it from 3-point lands and kept the Bruins in it until Sky Clark, Kobe Johnson, everybody else started hitting a 3 or 2 and getting to the line and making a play or two happen. But when Eric Dailey Jr. has some of his worst games, UCLA is fairly beatable if they're not having their best defensive game. The biggest win UCLA's had this year when Eric Dailey Jr. did not play well was Arizona. What's one thing that went well in that game? UCLA clamped Arizona down for the last few minutes and kept what is a top team in the Big 12 to under 60 points, which seems unheard of now compared to what happened in December. Now, a little bit different that Illinois had a lot of points. UCLA almost had that late game run without Dailey, and players were playing well. Let's look at some of the worst games Eric Dailey Jr.'s had. 15 minutes, 1 of 3, non-factor against New Mexico, loss. Let's think of the Arizona game, 1 of 3, 3 points, 22 minutes. UCLA played great defense. Got hurt against North Carolina, had 9 minutes, 1 of 2, non-factor. UCLA blew the game. Against Michigan, he was 0 of 4 from 3. Maybe had a new mask, I believe, in that game. 3 of 9, didn't do much. 3 of 9 against Maryland, didn't have a lot. Played against Rutgers, had a lot more buckets, but didn't shoot the ball well in 29 minutes. And we see when UCLA has been successful, we've seen a lot of really good Eric Dailey Jr. minutes, like against Iowa, Washington, Southern California, right? USC. But these last few games, Eric Dailey Jr. has been 4 of 12. You mix in the Michigan State game, 7 of 21. He's been a little bit ice cold in these last couple of games, 2 of 8 from 3. It just hasn't gone his way. Even missed a couple of free throws in this Illinois loss. But the trends, UCLA now having lost 7 games, how many has Dailey Jr. not played his best in? 1. Take a look at the Maryland game, 2, Michigan 3, North Carolina 4, missed the Nebraska game 5. So a lot of these losses, you can almost pretty much handpick out when Dailey has missed, been hurt, or not played as well. And that's when UCLA has lost. I'm not going to pin this on Eric Dailey Jr. No, sometimes you have your matchup, sometimes you have your night. It can't be on him every night. UCLA is supposed to have this depth where you can mix in an athletic big when your 7-footer is getting beat in the blockout. Or if Sky Clark is too emotionally involved in his return to Illinois when the students are going crazy because he only played there for 13 games his freshman year before going to Louisville and eventually UCLA, maybe, just maybe, you need other players to step up. Mac did his best with 6 rebounds, 5 assists, getting called for no touch fouls, right? When he stripped the ball and he got called for a foul. When he ripped it away after a missed free throw, got called for a foul. Bilodeau's making shots. Dylan Andrews, 9 points, but 7 assists, 1 turnover. Probably a lot of that doing late after 32 minutes of action. Huge for him to play big minutes and hopefully not cramp up after UCLA was very sick in the last week. There are some positives to take away, but we know what UCLA's weakness is, right? Sometimes it's when there's interior presence, rebounding, and physicality in the paint. Points in the paint was even. It's where UCLA gets beat, the rebounding and blocks, right? 3-1. Get out rebounded, -13. Those second chance points, you lose by 5, you give up 6, right? It's those hidden moments where if you can get those points back at the free throw line, you're not making those. Perfection is needed to beat these teams on the road. And they need to be better in those finer details to even beat Indiana, all right? Because if you lose to Indiana on the road, that's going to look worse than the Nebraska loss. Because Nebraska went through their 4-game skid and has started to win. Think about some of the best teams in the country, some name brands, right? The UConns, they've lost their 4 in a row or whatever it was. Looked ugly, popped in, hopped out of the top 25. Dan Hurley's like, we're going to look good in March. Mick Cronin, his defense, his team's heart, tenacity is going to keep his team together, competitive for a large portion of February into March, hopefully into April. But we know the weaknesses. The team's physical and can rebound and pushes a Daimata around. Eric Dailey Jr. isn't feeling it. UCLA is vulnerable if they're not forcing bad shots, stealing live ball turnovers, non-live ball turnovers. That can leave UCLA vulnerable. All right, so as much as a call or two could have swung it in UCLA's favor in a late-game miracle comeback, there's still a lot more things over the greater part of this game that UCLA needs to do right. And I'm not sure how much better they're feeling from being sick, right? I'm not sure if it's 24, 48 hour rule thing. Are they some of these players still not feeling it? Some of the youngsters are making plays like a Trent Perry with an and one. We're still learning how some of these players can build themselves into roles when, all right, Cronin's played 10, right? It's frustrating. It's frustrating because UCLA is already not getting the respect they deserve. And then they go out and they lose a game that was very losable in a matchup that probably didn't favor them, a travel, they were sick after everything. You would have loved for it on, I don't know if you consider Peacock, national television, streaming, whatever, if you watched it, if you listened to it. It's frustrating because you would have loved for them to steal it, beat Indiana, and then you have a lot of momentum, all right? Now think about this. UCLA's got Indiana. They still got Illinois and Ohio State. Ohio State keeps climbing in terms of potentially being a tournament lock. Minnesota should hopefully be a UCLA win. There's still a stretch where UCLA can win 3 in a row out of this. And then we can look at this in a stretch from mid-January heading into mid to late February where UCLA won 10 of 11. Is this the blip on the radar? Or is UCLA going to fail at winning anywhere past an hour beyond, not an hour, a time zone beyond the West Coast? Because you have to do it. Indiana is that chance. It is that chance to do it. Because I'm telling you, Northwestern's going to be even tougher, and so is Purdue. Those can be big wins, but those will be tough. And then the Big Ten tournament in Indianapolis, there is some potential for a lot of losses. I thought UCLA was going to lose at least 2 more. Illinois, one of them, right? If UCLA had won this game, that's a quad 1 win opportunity. And the Bruins have not done so if it's further than Phoenix. They have to go beat Indiana to get the job done and prove to themselves, regardless of how ugly or great they play, that they can do it. And that might get that all right, the monkey off their back. It might get whatever you think. All right, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's get it done. But tonight was not that night. You don't give up 11 threes, 20 free throws, and allow a team to shoot 50% while they also get their misses at a good clip. Not going to happen. Not going to happen on the road. I'm very appreciative of the effort. And if you don't recognize that, you're going to sit there and type the comments, they suck. I don't know. No, every other team, most of the teams in the country lose that game by 30 and quit halfway through the second half when Cronin throwing a tantrum, or you're not getting calls in a mini run that might make it. No, this team fought their way back. So we have to recognize the long-term flaws, but the heart that they can flip it in an instant and nearly get a win. Because you're going to have to do that in a Big Ten tournament to beat a good team or to steal a victory in March. That is how you're going to have to win one of these games. Not down 16 with 3 minutes left, but they will need to steal a victory. To go on a big run, UCLA needs a stolen victory to either pad the resume or when they go on a run in March. Be like, they're down. And then they come out of nowhere and they win the game, and then they have better matchups. When they have a matchup disadvantage like Illinois kind of is, that's when you're down 8 and they go on a 12-0 blitz and that you just, how did Illinois lose that game? That's how the game is going to have to be won sometimes in a March Madness matchup that doesn't favor UCLA. Until that point, we're going to be here with Locked On UCLA, talking UCLA football, men's basketball, women's basketball has the SC matchup coming up. I will talk about that matchup in the next Locked On UCLA podcast. Juju Watkins, Lauren Betts, National Players of the Year candidates. Who's going to win that in matchup 1 versus 6 in the country? All right. And UCLA has to go play Indiana. What does this loss mean for them going forward? Are they never going to be in the top 25? I completely disagree with that. They totally should be. I think the UCLA is more deserving, even with this loss, than some teams currently in the top 25. Let me get to that. All right. They have their weaknesses. Yes, this UCLA team does. But they're still deserving, as I said the other podcast on Monday, that they are deserving of being in the top 25, even with this loss. Looks even better considering they came back to play very well. Very well in terms of keeping the score close and nearly stealing it. All right. And until then, we have a dejected 8 clap and talk some more UCLA and later Locked On UCLA episodes. All right. Tell me your thoughts. Tell me if you agree, disagree, yada, yada, yada. Hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.